The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I got a really great email. I think this came from Dion, who said, David, have you ever noticed how Republicans don't care about the welfare of small businesses when it comes to net neutrality or Walmart, but all of a sudden, when it's about Obamacare, they are always on the front lines of defense, claiming it is terrible for small businesses. This is an absolutely concise and accurate distillation of the double standard around supposedly being for small business. Supposedly Republicans support small business. We hear this all the time. They say it all the time. They argue that if the rich and super rich and corporations get tax cuts, it's good for small businesses, when in reality, it just allows the richest Americans to save more of their money in a bank account, not really stimulative to small businesses. However, when you actually cut taxes for low and middle class individuals, because they have a much higher marginal propensity to consume, you really do stimulate small business because those people need that money, whereas the groups with the higher incomes don't need any additional money. They're unlikely to spend any of it. However, then we see that they argue that Obamacare should be repealed because it places an undue burden on small business owners to provide health care to their employees, even though they might not be able to afford that. It's bad for small business. They care about small business. Unfortunately, then we see that they unilaterally and unanimously love companies like Walmart, known to drive down wages, leaving less money for people to spend at small businesses, known to literally drive small businesses out of business. Now, Lewis, is driving small businesses out of business good for small businesses or bad for small businesses?
David, that's just capitalism. That's just the way it goes. I guess in their opinion, you probably shouldn't even ask that question because it's just the nature of the beast.
It's a heretical question. And then lastly, as Dion said, when we look at net neutrality, we look at internet law favoring huge platforms and content providers to pay more for fast lanes, in spite of the fact that it will put small businesses at a disadvantage. It will put independently run media at a disadvantage. And the huge advantage is for the really big businesses. So again, it's about opposing Obamacare in great part. The idea that the Republican Party today, 2014 in the United States, is for small business is an obvious distortion of the truth, and we only need to look at the policies to realize it. But it's become a popular meme, Lewis. We hear it. Joe the Plumber's entire fake campaign around supporting presidential candidate McCain over presidential candidate Obama was based around the idea that he thought Obama would be bad for the small business, which he wasn't even involved in reality. But putting that aside for a second, this is a really popular idea on the right, and it's just not true.
Not true at all. And let's not forget that small businesses aren't the ones contributing millions of dollars to campaigns for candidates. So, of course, they are siding with big business because big business keeps them in their cushy job.
Yeah, if you look at who is going to benefit from the increase from $123,000 per campaign cycle in contributions limit to the unlimited contributions allowed by the McCutcheon case decided by the Supreme Court recently, it's not the small business owners that the Republicans claim to support. It's disproportionately the top executives at these huge multinational firms. That's exactly right, Lewis. And it's sad to me because I'm not really trying to argue with people. I'm just trying to show them that they're being deceived and they're voting against their own best interests. Basically what the entire Tea Party movement is based around, right? Supporting policies that don't have your best interests in mind. And I don't know how to more clearly communicate this to people.
Maybe you can't, David, but certainly knowledge is power.
Yeah, I agree with you there. A rare moment of clarity for Republican Utah Senator Orrin Hatch, who conceded the day before yesterday that it's only a matter of time before gay marriage is legal across the country, even though personally he doesn't think that it should be. He was on local radio on KSL on Doug Wright's program, and he said some people seem to be unable to realize what's happening in the real world. He said, let's face it, anybody who does not believe that gay marriage is going to be the law of the land just hasn't been observing what's going on. He is a 7-term Republican senator, a strong proponent of keeping marriage exclusively an institution for men and women, for one man and one woman, I should say, to make that perfectly clear. He says he doesn't agree with any of the string of pro-gay marriage rulings, but he says, look, we have a reality here. We have an empirical reality where gay rights advocates have won 14 lower court cases since the landmark U.S. Supreme Court ruling last summer. Gay and lesbian couples can marry in 19 states plus the District of Columbia. We have Oregon and Pennsylvania as the latest states to join the list. He says no one should suffer discrimination. Religious people should try to understand others' beliefs. Lewis, Orrin Hatch is a guy who is absolutely on the fringes on so many issues. He's just talking sense. He said, listen, personally, I don't agree with this. And while we could have that argument with him, he says we shouldn't discriminate against others. We should see this from the perspective of LGBT rights, pro-equality individuals. And we can't ignore the empirical realities of the direction of this country. He's just saying the obvious.
He's a guy who I guess can see the forest for the trees. We've been saying the same things for quite a while. And we've had people on the show who we've said these things to, yet they can't seem to grasp it.
The other thing is, Lewis, though, the fiscal conservative element of it. You would think some of these guys would realize, in spite of this going against their personal beliefs, call them sincerely held religious beliefs, call them whatever you want, there's nothing fiscally conservative about appeal after appeal and lawsuit. And ultimately, if this does take a Supreme Court case to really make this the law of the land, we're talking about millions of dollars, right? Supreme Court cases are expensive. There's nothing fiscally conservative about that. Spending millions to try to limit people's rights, I can't think of anything more against the so-called small government conservative values that these groups tend to agree with when I guess it's convenient for them.
Right. Well, we can look at so many issues and look at spending and pretty much across the board, Republicans, conservatives, I should say, in government are spending a lot more money than they'd like their constituents to believe.
Here's something I want to talk to the audience about. I haven't spoken to Lewis about this in detail yet either. I had a great idea the other day. Actually, no, I didn't have the idea. Someone I know who is a friend of mine and a fan of this show gave me the idea of doing a David Pakman Show calendar for 2015. This would probably be a 12-month calendar. My idea would be that it would start November of 2014, so people could put it up a couple of months early. So we'd be looking at 14 images or graphics for this calendar. I want to crowdsource ideas from our audience for what this calendar could be. I'm going to throw out some ideas, Lewis, and then you can give me some of yours, but really I want the audience to determine this. Patriot Mail. We take 14 of the best Patriot Mails and actually put a graphic together that maybe is a transcript of the Patriot Mail. Maybe the audience contributes a drawing or design of some kind that goes with the Patriot Mail. And you've got the 2015 Patriot Mail calendar that you can put up on your wall. Here, that's one idea I had. Another idea would be audience submitted political memes. We take meme submissions. We've already received 30, 40, 50 from our audience. We put them out to a vote, and the top 12 or 14, since we'll start the calendar 2 months early, make it onto the calendar. Those are a couple of ideas. Any ideas you, Lewis, think would be funny? I know that we've gotten this silly idea from some people in the audience to do like a boxers or boxer briefs calendar pictures. I'm not up for doing that.
No, that's out of the question. I really like the Patriot Mail idea. I think it would be funny, but I don't know. I got to think about it. Maybe we'll see what I come up with.
So send us ideas. Please email us the ideas. If you want to contribute something, my idea is that this will be audience generated in every single way. So if you have some ideas, email us, davidpakman.com, click on contact us, And I want to put this thing together sometime in late summer because we want to have time to plan it all. We have to get the graphics. We've got to get it all approved. We have to get it over to a printer. There's many steps, Lewis. So we're starting this now. I think it could be really cool. And then we can offer it as a standalone item for purchase, but also as a membership premium later on in the year.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I'm fully on board with this one.
And speaking of membership premiums, we have for the next few days an awesome membership special for you. You have to go to davidpakman.com/summertime14. Every day we get emails from people asking about the bumper stickers that we gave away at the Indiegogo campaign. The bumper stickers are not for sale, but we do have some bumper stickers left, and we're offering them along with a free t-shirt with a yearly membership. You just have to go to davidpakman.com/summertime14, the number 14. You will get a 1-year membership with all of the great membership perks, which you can check out online at no cost now, as well as a David Pakman Show t-shirt made from 100% recycled materials and a David Pakman Show bumper sticker. This is all thrown in with your yearly membership. Take advantage of this. Membership prices will increase soon as a result of our expansion to 5 days a week. Lock in your rate and get a bunch of free stuff. davidpakman.com/summertime14. It is Friday. We will be back right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
This program is mostly viewer-supported, and our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is producing a new weekly video feature on their YouTube channel, Liberal Bias Video. To get the latest updates on how to uncover liberal bias in the world, subscribe to Liberal Bias on YouTube. James Israel is today's member of the day. James, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can become a supporter of the David Pakman Show and join James by going to davidpakman.com/membership. We are not funded by big corporations, media conglomerates, or rich guys who send us checks. So please do consider becoming a David Pakman Show member, and you'll get a great list of member perks, including the bonus show, which is a whole extra show just for David Pakman Show members, commercial-free audio and video streams of our show, as well as an archive that dates back to 2005, and you will be invited to our upcoming David Pakman Show Town Hall, where you can join and ask Lewis questions, you can ask me questions. It's a lot of fun. davidpakman.com/membership. This week in show history, 1 year ago today, conservative Phyllis Schlafly urged the Republican Party to focus exclusively on white voters. We would have thought that Republicans could do basic math, that they would know that that was not a plan that would work. It was complete nonsense, but somehow Phyllis Schlafly still thought it was something that made sense to say, and she's still considered by many to be kind of like a logical and even-keeled right-winger. It's funny because every time she comes on our show, Lewis, I get her to agree with our progressive perspective. She doesn't really seem to realize that she's accepting our logic, but still subscribing to opposite beliefs.
Right. Of course, when you start talking about women with her, that might be a completely different story. Her views in that department are definitely worth some online browsing. She has some incredible quotes. She still does seem kind of popular, but you know, it's funny. I looked into her a little bit, and her Facebook page only has about 1,700 likes. So you have to wonder who her audience is.
Yeah, maybe not Facebook goers. That's possible. Also, at the factual level, Republicans cannot rely on white voters to the extent that they are. And they're going to need, I think in 2016, they would need something around 2/3 of the white vote in order to make up for their deficiency in the non-white vote. And it's just not a strategy that makes any sense. It's not a winning strategy for Republicans. I hope that they do try to follow it, because it is not a winning strategy. 3 years ago this week, the Catholic Church investigated itself and you'll be glad to know that they determined they were not to blame for the ongoing pedophilia and child abuse scandals. It was basically the pinnacle of the child sex abuse epidemic, and in March, Pope Benedict issued an apology to people who suffered from child abuse in Ireland. The Vatican has, since Pope Benedict has shown up, the Vatican published new guidelines on dealing with clergy. The guidelines told bishops to cooperate with police and to report sex abuse allegations, but did not make the reporting mandatory, which is really one of the key issues here, right, Lewis? If the reporting is not mandatory, it's great to have a little pat on the back encouragement from the Pope, but you really need to make the reporting mandatory.
Yeah, it was just for PR. It was just to kind of save face a little bit. But then Pope Francis came along, and a couple months ago, he told the church to act decisively to root out and punish pedophile priests. And even just a few days ago, he came out with a few more statements saying something along the lines of, you are, not honoring God if you abuse children, and that it's a terrible thing. So we will see what happens. I mean, if anyone is going to fix things, I guess he's the guy. But in my opinion, they're beyond fixing. I'm
pretty sick and tired in general. This doesn't just apply to the Catholic Church, of these internal investigations that always clear everybody of wrongdoing, but lead to, of course, some kind of implicit admission of guilt via the issuance of new guidelines, right? Listen, we investigated everything. Nobody did anything wrong that's worth punishing, but here's a whole list of rules to make sure this never happens again. Of course, kind of conceding that it was a disaster.
Right. And to me, I don't know how effective it is for Pope Francis to tell all of the people that are committing these horrible atrocities that they are atrocities. I mean, I think these people already know. And I really don't think they care.
4 years ago this week, Sarah Palin and other prominent Republicans commented on Rand Paul's civil rights gaffe. Rachel Maddow called it nonsense and said that it really should get people's attention. And this was after Rand Paul referenced a Seinfeld episode, and he told a crowd about his admiration for the romance of the Hispanic culture. Rand Paul also asked a crowd at Howard University if they knew what the NAACP was founded by Republicans, and he told the same crowd that he never questioned the Civil Rights Act. He continues, even to this day, to tiptoe around his beliefs and his position on the Civil Rights Act. He has said that while he is not racist and he doesn't want businesses to be racist and he wouldn't go to a racist business, that businesses should be legally entitled to put signs up and to turn away black people, for example, even though he wouldn't go to that business. Where are we now on this view from Rand Paul? It seems he's been involved in so much nonsense since then that has kind of been on the back burner.
It has, but I think that issue alone is enough to make it so that he can never win the presidency. I mean, I think it's just said everything. I mean, his opinions on it were recorded so many times, and I just don't see how the vast majority of our country would maybe not the vast majority, but the majority of our country would vote for him after hearing him say things like that.
I think that one of the funniest things about Rand Paul ever is that he created a board to certify ophthalmologists, and he appointed his wife to be the president of that board, which subsequently certified him as an ophthalmologist. But it's not like the official actual certification. It's just a group he created. It's almost like if today we created some kind of, I don't know, radio broadcasting hall of fame and immediately inducted ourselves into it. It would really be of very little merit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, perhaps this is some type of board of ophthalmologists who don't necessarily have to treat black people if they don't want to, right?
Yeah, it's the group that says while they deplore racism and they absolutely would never go to ophthalmologists who have signs that say we don't treat black people, they absolutely want ophthalmologists to have the right to put those signs up.
Yeah, I think that's the entire reason of the creation of this board.
All right, that's This Week in Show History. We will take a break. We have so much more coming up today, including your questions, which we will answer.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Last week we talked about Peter LaBarbera, known to some as Porno Pete. He doesn't like that name, and the reason his name came up was because he said that he, as a Christian, resented being forced to watch Michael Sam, the NFL draftee, kiss his boyfriend. And he said he was simply forced to do it. He couldn't change his channel. He couldn't look away. Yet he's never talked about being forced to watch heterosexual couples kiss. So anyway, a lot of people emailed me and they said, you mentioned some interview with Porno Pete, Peter LaBarbera. What was that all about? So that is this week's interview. This is from, I actually don't have the original date. This was back in our old studio in the basement of Valley Free Radio in Northampton, Massachusetts. We've got Valley Free Radio Studio there, and Peter LaBarbera. This is the interview, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the aftermath. Joining us on the phone is Peter LaBarbera, president of Americans for Truth about homosexuality. Hey, Peter.
Hey, David.
Hey, so tell me, what's the one-liner about, how would you describe your organization? What do you do?
We're a single-issue organization that's on the other side of the debate over homosexuality in the culture.
Which is the other side? Remind me.
The other side is the massive gay rights movement, which most Americans are probably vastly exposed to. We're on the pro-family side. We oppose, for example, gay marriage, and we oppose the idea that homosexuality is the basis for civil rights.
So tell me about, what's the truth about, maybe you alluded to it there, what is the truth about homosexuality that people just don't seem to know, or at least people not part of your group?
Well, we would claim that the truth is that homosexuality is about behavior, that it's not an inborn identity. I've met, in my experience working on this issue for 20 years, probably 50 former homosexuals, people who once considered themselves gay and have left the lifestyle. So it's about changeable behavior, which we believe is immoral.
And do people need therapy to change the behavior? Do they just need to say, is it a religious thing? Do they need to find Jesus?
I don't think there's a way into homosexuality, one way in. I don't think there's one way out. Some people do have therapy, and it's interesting that the gay activist movement is sort of trying to shut down the idea of therapy to get out. But there's other people I've talked to, for example, a lot of committed Christians who basically left homosexuality on the basis of their religious beliefs. They have a newfound faith in God, and that's how they got out without therapy.
Now, I think you did mention this, but of course your organization is pro-family, right?
Absolutely.
Of course. Okay. So why are you boycotting McDonald's now?
Well, we're boycotting McDonald's. This is sort of a lonely fight, I think, because we're not a large organization. But McDonald's has just begun running an ad in France, which is sort of an affirmative ad of youth homosexuality. In other words, it's an ad about a teenage boy who sort of has a boyfriend in his all-boys school.
I've seen it.
And the message is, come as you are. In other words, being gay as a teenage boy, having a romantic relationship with another boy is a good thing, and we're going to encourage it at McDonald's. And we believe that that's a bad message for young people, especially given what I said before, that homosexuality is not something that you basically are. It's more of a behavior.
Now, hold on a second. I think we saw the same ad. I don't know that, it sounds a little odd to me to say that the ad is promoting that being homosexual and in a relationship is a good thing. I thought what it was saying was just that if you are homosexual, McDonald's is not going to discriminate against you, and you are as welcome here as anybody else.
Right. Well, that's two ways to look at it, David, and we might have to agree to disagree on that one. Our position is that homosexual behavior is aberrant behavior. And so when you do a whole commercial, which is basically affirming youth homosexuality, which still remains controversial. I don't know if it's controversial in France, but it's controversial here in the United States. We're saying that's not a good thing for a large corporation to affirm.
So is it, in the U.S., in your opinion, is it more controversial to be gay and under 18 than gay and over 18?
Well, I can see we're probably on opposite sides of this issue, David, but what I can tell you is many people simply do not like the idea of affirming homosexuality especially as some sort of rigid, inborn characteristic, who you are, to young people. And in fact, what's happening in a lot of schools is schools will get pro-gay affirmation, but they'll never hear the other side of the issue.
I didn't know there was another side.
Well, I thought I just gave you one, which is, for example, that people can leave the lifestyle. Now, you'll have a lot of gay activists like Wayne Besson who will say, oh, you cannot do. Those people were never gay, blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying is, if you have to take at face value the idea that somebody says they're gay, that's how they define themselves, then how can you discriminate against people who said, I once was gay, but I'm not gay any longer?
Hey, let me ask you this. How old, in your experience, are people usually when they decide to start being gay?
I don't know. I don't have the answer of how old they are. What I can tell you is there are surveys which show that the age when people are coming out as gay, as openly homosexual, has gone down significantly. I think the average age now is somewhere, in the young teens or younger, perhaps.
Right, and well, it's. I think it's.
Let me finish.
Please.
It used to be that people would come out like in college or later,
right.
And I think part of the reason that's happening is that there is this ubiquitous propaganda more on one side of the issue than on the other.
Well, I'll tell you, Pete, you couldn't be more wrong. The reason people are coming out earlier is because why would they wait until after high school? Because their parents would have killed them if they had found out about it, because it was just not something that was, they did not feel comfortable. And now as we learn more and more that it's okay to be gay and it's not evil, you're not going to hell, kids are more comfortable coming out earlier.
That's your opinion, David.
It is, no, of course, and we've heard yours, and we've heard yours.
I hope you would agree but I hope you would agree, in the interest of balance and impartiality, which our public schools are supposed to be, I hope that the kids would also learn that, hey, just as there are people who are proudly gay, there are also people who are proudly out of that lifestyle. The problem is that a lot of the institutions have sort of bought your propaganda, and they're only teaching one side.
Right.
And I think in the interest of diversity, which your side probably talks a lot more of than my side, in the interest of diversity, they ought to give the other side of the question.
Well, I was doing a little research. It seems, Peter, like your organization is considered so crazy that even the anti-gay movement sometimes thinks you're too extreme. I mean, the example of the election in, the election in Maine, where you and your friend Mike Heath were basically shut out of the process by the National Organization for Marriage People. It's amazing,
David,
is it not?
Two things on that, David. One is your producer should have told me how strongly your pro-gay views were. But that aside, listen, we're in a debate here, and I think it's interesting that the people who are doing the censoring in this debate are not the pro-family side, it's the pro-gay side. You have groups like GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, which is absolutely desperate to make sure that no ex-gays appear on shows like, on CNN and other programs. It's not the pro-gay, it's not the side, my side, the pro-family side, which is censoring. It's your side. And my question is, what are you afraid of?
I have no idea. I'll be honest. I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're not censoring. At least you're having me on. Although I wish your producer would have told me how strongly you felt on the issue.
I don't know what you're. I'll be honest. I don't know what. I'm not censoring anything. I'm not interrupting you. You're allowed to say your piece.
No, I agree. You're not censoring, but there is a lot of censorship on the pro-gay side these days.
Gotcha. Now, do you go undercover to gay sex clubs?
No, I don't. What you're referring to is we do find it interesting and actually quite a news story that in places like San Francisco, you have these outdoor extravaganzas on the street in which men basically walk around totally naked. Now, I don't know where you live, but where I live, that would sort of be aberrant behavior and certainly something that people find newsworthy. And unfortunately, the liberal media, of which you may or may not be a part, David.
We absolutely are a part, I'll tell you.
It's sort of like generally find it ho-hum. And even here in Chicago, they have gay pride parades in which there's been actually sex acts that have been committed during the pride parade. And I'm wondering, are gays the only ones who get like sort of the special rights to go prancing around naked in the streets, or is that something that's open to all Americans?
I don't know. I'll tell you, I agree with you that if being nude in public or sex acts in public are illegal, it doesn't matter whether you're gay or straight, you've got to suffer the consequences. I mean, I think we can agree on that, right?
Well, yeah, maybe we can agree on that. If I were to go nude, that could legitimately be called a hate crime.
Okay, so you're saying you have not gone undercover to like leather fetish conferences and taken pictures or gay sex clubs?
When I first started doing this work, we basically are banned from gay events, from getting the news out, and we wanted to get out stories which we found interesting.
Right.
I still think it's interesting that major hotels, for example, host leather events which promote the most incredibly dangerous and disturbing behavior, and it's sort of treated as if it's sort of a civil rights issue, and we think it's a legitimate story that there is this radicalism in the gay movement.
So now, you go and you photograph those.
That is not to say, well, when there's an interesting story, photographs are taken. Yes,
That's
we
right.
take photographs of the annual Folsom Street Pride Parade in San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi's home district, where they actually have thousands of men who walk around nude. We think that's an interesting news story.
So let me
But
see, just to be
I want
absolutely
to say
clear.
that there are gays who agree with us that this is very extreme behavior and it should be exposed.
Uganda is proposing legislation that will make homosexual activity punishable by life in prison for both parties engaging in the acts. Do you agree with that?
No, I do not. Let me be clear. We do not agree with anything that would be construed as violence or hatred towards gays.
Oh.
Now,
Wow.
sodomy laws are another matter. I believe, for example, in the United States of America, that the Supreme Court ruling that struck down sodomy laws was wrong. I think sodomy laws should basically be according to an area of the country by the community standards, which is to say that you're never going to see New York City pass an anti-sodomy law, but if they want to pass one in, Mississippi or, Kansas, then they should have the right to pass behavior against sodomy. That's how it always was in this country.
Okay, so yes or no, do you support the Ugandan legislation?
No, I don't. I would support if there were reforms in the legislation. In other words, I think, as I understand the Uganda legislation, a part of it is just applying the same penalty to what was, for example, if a heterosexual man rapes a young girl, a child girl, I believe they would give the death penalty. Is that correct?
You probably know more than I do.
Well, I think so. So, in other words, if that's the law for heterosexuals, a man raping a very young girl and he gets a death penalty, then we certainly would agree that that should apply to a man who rapes a young boy. We don't agree to the death penalty for somebody caught practicing homosexuality.
Gotcha. And do you believe what some conservatives are saying, that legalizing gay marriage would open the door to either three-way marriages or marriages with animals? Do you see that slippery slope?
I don't know about marriages with animals, but I certainly believe it'll open the door to polygamy, because here's why. One of the central arguments of gay activists is, hey, it's people who love each other. Who are you to deny them their love? Well, guess what? And you know this, and it's not just gays. It's also like, some Muslims have two wives. There are multiple partner couple, or what do you call them? Truples?
It sounds like you know much more about it than I do, Pete. I'll tell you.
Well, let me just ask you. There are multiple partner relationships in which they affirm their love for each other.
None of which are legal.
Who are we to deny? Yeah, but so was gay marriage until about 5 years ago, right?
Right.
So why should multiple partner couples who are relationships who have that same love, why should that love be denied?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I just don't really see it happening. And lastly, I know we've had both Paul Cameron on the show as well as the God Hates Fags people. If your organization disappeared and you had to align with one of those two, which would it be?
Well, it's sort of a foolish question, David, but we have denounced the God Hates Fags guy, Fred Phelps.
Right.
I think it's a dangerous message. I think it's not a biblical message. I don't think he's acting like a Christian. I don't think God goes around calling people fags. And it's interesting to us that the same gay activists who denounce him, and rightly so, we have many gay activists who are quite willing to call people like me names. So maybe they should apply that same thing. So I definitely think that Fred Phelps is a wingnut. And now that he's going out and protesting funerals, I think that's quite a way to influence people, going to people's funerals with his idiotic protests.
So you're more in the Paul Cameron side.
Oh no, I'm just saying that we think it's very dangerous that Fred Phelps does what he does, especially going to I don't think he should be made illegal.
Gotcha.
But we just think what he does is nuts.
All right, we've been speaking with Peter LaBarbera. Of course, we learned about truffles. We learned about all of the various problems that we have with homosexuality. I do appreciate you calling in today. I really do.
Can I give the website, David?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure, it's americansfortruth.org, americansfortruth.org, and you can get in.
So Peter LaBarbera, after the fact, not happy with the interview. We got a couple of emails, exchanged some emails. He refused to come back onto the program. We invited him on numerous times, and I don't remember his exact explanation, but part of it has to do with our involvement in the so-called gay mafia, etc. He has tweeted to me several times after we've put out stories. I don't know if he follows us on Twitter or what the deal is, but every once in a while we hear from Peter LaBarbera. He's welcome back on the program anytime. I would love to have him. And yeah, I don't know. That's it. So that was Peter LaBarbera.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's answer some of your questions. You can submit your questions via email to us through our website, davidpakman.com. Click on Contact Us or leave us voicemail, 219-2DAVID-P. Here is question number 1 this week. The topic is the war on drugs, submitted via voicemail. Let's listen.
Hey, David, this is Brennan out of Texas. I was calling in to ask you your opinion after I watched the video about Elizabeth Hasselbeck being dumbfounded by opinions on pot. I was wondering what you think. Why do you think the Republican Party is continuing this policy of the war on drugs, but marijuana being specific? I think this is going to end up costing them more votes in the future than it's worth, and it's going to cost them more than they're going to gain. So why do they continue to do this? Is it incompetency or is it stubbornness?
I think that ultimately they're going to have to change their view, right? Because the current status quo position from the American right on the war on drugs is not going to fly for too much longer. But to answer the question of why, it depends on which part of the Republican Party we're talking about. There's one part of the Republican Party, Lewis, that understands how important the war on drugs is in terms of funding so many of our law enforcement operations. So on the one hand, they claim to want small government, but at the same time, they feed this prison industrial complex. For some, it is racism. For some, okay, just for some. I'm not saying for everybody or even close to everybody. For some, it is racism, and we know that the war on drugs was created as a way to incarcerate disproportionately minority drug users. And then for some, it is morality, right? They truly believe that marijuana legalization is just flat out immoral. And then there's that group as well. But I don't think it's really going to be viable long term. And we do have the more libertarian wing of the Republican Party that tends to be against the war on drugs. They seem to, for a variety of reasons, get that it doesn't make any sense.
Right. So there are many reasons, but I think across the board, stubbornness is a major factor in all of these reasons.
But stubbornness connected to something, right? Stubbornness connected to antiquated ideas of what morality is, or stubbornness connected to the desire to see minorities disproportionately imprisoned. So it's stubbornness, but rooted in something else, I think.
True, right. But stubbornness, as we know in general, is it's just, I don't know, it's a major staple of the Republican Party.
Well, when it's really the definition, right? Conservatism, maintaining the status quo. It is the definition of stubbornness, to not allow a change of ideas or a change of policy, etc. So I think there are a number of factors at play. It's not going to be viable politically that much longer. There's going to have to be some adjustment on it, although it's still not going to be, you know, pro-legalization for a really, really long time, if ever. We don't know right now. Let's go to the next question. This is also via voicemail. It has to do with motorsports. Listen to this.
Hey, I got a question for your Friday show. Are either of you fans of motorsports? And if so, who are you rooting for in this weekend's Indy 500?
Yeah. Lewis, I'll go to you first. I mean, the Indy 500, we're a little bit late on that part, but what's your view? Motorsports, are you a fan?
I've never really been a fan. I guess occasionally I'd watch, if I was flipping through the channels, some of the drag racing that was on. I don't know, some of the dirt biking and stuff like that is all right. But I've just never really been a huge fan. And I think I would rather watch F1 over NASCAR. But yeah, I don't seek it out.
I was going to say something pretty similar, which is I have never been a fan of NASCAR or drag racing. In fact, I'm quite uninterested in that. Never been a fan of motocross or any of that type of stuff. The one thing that I used to kind of be able to tolerate was Formula One, IndyCar racing. It was okay, but again, I mean, right now, if I'm even going to watch something on TV that's you know, kind of like a live event, there's so much in terms of other sports, Bruins, Patriots, Red Sox, and Celtics to follow, or just big games like the Super Bowl or NBA Finals. World Cup is coming up. That, to be perfectly frank, motorsports is pretty low right now on my list of priorities. I don't think it's an insult to say that, right, Lewis? I mean, I'm just not a fan.
No, it's just personal preference. I mean, obviously, okay, I prefer football over motorsports. That's just me.
All right. Thank you, Lewis. Very, very insightful. All right. Here's a question, email question. This is from Karen. Have you ever been fired or laid off from a job? Okay. This is an interesting one. I have been both fired and laid off from different jobs. The fired one is an interesting story. It was one of the first jobs I ever had. I think I was 15 years old. Okay. And the job was at one of these big laser tag and roller skating facilities. And I worked kind of all over the thing, and you know, I was all over. Anyway, there was this guy who was like he made inflatable balloons, okay? And he was kind of a quirky guy. He didn't really get along with everybody. And he had this pair of rollerblades. And once he had left these rollerblades behind, and I and another employee thought it would be funny to hide his rollerblades in one of the lockers for a while that we had a key to. Technically, the key was assigned to me. So we said, sure, let's put him in there. We locked it up, whatever, forgot about it. Turned out that he started looking for his skates. He had reported them as having been stolen. Nobody could find them. I had completely forgotten about it. I think I was on vacation for 10 days or something like that. I get back, and apparently all of the lockers had been opened up, and they had been found. And of course, the locker where they were had been cross-referenced, and it turned out it was a locker I had the key to. And I was brought in. I was 14 or 15 years old, Lewis. This was when if you were 14 or 15, you could get a work permit to get some of these jobs that you otherwise had to be 16 for. And I was asked to explain. I said, oh, yeah, you know, this was weeks ago. It was just a joke. We put them in there. Nobody used them. We weren't stealing them. We weren't selling them. They're way too big for me to use. You know, I'm sorry. We just forgot about the joke. And he said, well, it's theft and I have to fire you. And I was 14 or 15 years old and I was fired from a job. Fortunately, after a few weeks, I think I called and I said, listen, I don't know if you've reconsidered. I would still like to have this job. I meant no harm. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was stolen. It was just a misunderstanding. And I was reinstated, Lewis. But that's my story of being fired.
Okay. I guess I only have one story, too. I was only fired from one job. It was while we were doing the show. I was still part of the program. But I was a camera operator for a small company based out of a very small town in Western Massachusetts. And I worked for the company for many months. Eventually, I got a call one night at around, it's probably around 10:30, 11 at night, saying, we need you to work tomorrow. We need you to pick up this, you know, early job tomorrow. And I said, I can't do it. So the next day, I got an email saying that if I ever turn down, if I ever say no to that again, if that situation ever comes up and I say I can't do it, that I'll be fired. I responded saying, oh, this is kind of strange. We just had a big meeting where everything was discussed, but this wasn't discussed. And, you know, making it clear that this was kind of ridiculous. I mean, who does that? And the day after that, I was fired.
How was the firing communicated to you?
Well, I kind of had a feeling because they told me to bring the equipment back, which was unusual. Normally, I just kept it because I was working so much. And so I kind of had a feeling that I'd be fired. So I show up and the boss sits down there and he says, you're fired. He was this Chilean guy. And I said, okay, why? He said, I asked my lawyer if the email you sent me was rude, and he said it was rude. And I'm like, oh, you didn't want to ask me about it? And he just
so I see. So the Chilean thing is relevant because his English was not that great. So he may not have had a grasp to realize whether it was a rude email, thus asking an attorney, is this rude?
Yeah, I mean, it was blunt. You know, it certainly was not rude.
Yeah.
But believe me, I can be rude. But it was just blunt. And anyway, yeah, that's what happened. I was making a lot of money, so it was kind of disappointing. But anyway, the company was doomed anyway. They ended up losing their big contract, and it was, it wouldn't have lasted anyway.
I do have a laid off story, which is I've talked about working at Circuit City when I was late high school and then my first year of college. Circuit City at the time was like a commissioned sales place, and they were big on competition and blah, blah, blah. And I was consistently one of the top 2 salespeople in the store. And they decided, you know what, Best Buy is only paying whatever the minimum wage was at the time, $6.75, $7.25, I don't know. We would save so much money if we switched from commissioned sales to hourly. And in order to keep people, because you can't really offer them less money than they're making, there was some law in Massachusetts that didn't allow for a reduction in salary like that for the same position. They said, well, if they're making like up to $20 an hour, we'll just say, hey, instead of making roughly $20 or $17 an hour on commission, we'll just pay you $17 an hour. The idea being eventually those employees would leave, they would replace them with a minimum wage person, and it would kind of work itself out. But if you were making over $20 or $21 or $22 an hour average commissions, they said, we just don't want to pay that much, so we're going to lay those people off. They brought me in. It was me and one other guy in that store were above that threshold, and they said, we just don't have a position based on this new policy for you. You can collect unemployment, blah, blah, blah. And I said to them, I don't know that this makes sense, because you're going to need a lot of minimum wage people to replace one good salesperson, because they'll have no incentive to sell anything. And lo and behold, their payroll actually went up in the period following this incredible realignment. And subsequently, Circuit City went out of business. So it worked well for me. I was in college and I was able to collect unemployment for a while, and no complaints at all about how it worked out, I must say.
All right. There it is. David, a lazy Democrat who likes to mooch off the government.
Right.
I think we have undeniable proof that is what's going on.
No question. Because, hey, my wages were paying into that unemployment system. It would be insane if I were to then later collect on the wages I had earned as a working employee when my position was eliminated. That is evil. I was mooching off of the system quite clearly. All right, great bonus show for you today. Keep the questions coming. We'll keep answering them. 219-2-DAVID-P. And we will talk to you in just minutes on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.